Batman, 1966. 15 weird facts. You didn't know? It has been more than 60 years since Batman first hit the airwaves, but hardly anyone remembers just how strange the story behind the cameras really was. Adam West's Caped Crusader made Bat-branded absurdity feel completely normal, lecturing crooks about road safety one minute and diving into shark-infested water the next. And while what audiences saw on screen was memorable enough, what happened behind the scenes was even stranger. Today we are counting down 15 weird facts about Batman 1966 that you probably never knew. So stick around for number 1, when we reveal how a legendary Bat Dance move was invented mere minutes before the cameras started rolling. Before we head to Gotham, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell. It genuinely helps more retro television fans discover videos just like this one. Number 15. The most famous car in television history cost exactly $1. Now, take a moment with that. Before it ever wore a single coat of black paint, the Batmobile was a forgotten 1955 Lincoln Futura, an experimental show car that Ford had spent a small fortune on and then quietly written off as expensive scrap. Custom car legend George Barris scooped it up for the price of a candy bar, and then, of course, the panic set in. When producer William Dozier came calling about a car for his new superhero show, Barris was handed a brutal deadline of roughly 3 weeks to deliver something audiences had never seen. Building an entirely new vehicle from scratch in that window simply was not an option. So Barris looked at the Futura's enormous tail fins and bubble canopy and made a decision that would define an entire television era. Keep the bones, make it weird. The result, soaked in glossy black paint with cherry red trim and more bat-shaped gadgets than any car reasonably needs, became one of the most recognized vehicles ever put on film, which, honestly, is remarkable considering the thing could barely move. Weighed down by a heavy steel body, prone to overheating, and famous among the crew for blowing tires at the worst possible moments, the Batmobile topped out at a modest speed that a determined jogger could probably have kept pace with. Every thrilling high-speed chase you remember was mostly clever editing, camera angles, and Adam West doing his very best impression of a man being chased by criminals faster than his car. Of course, none of that mattered in the end. The Batmobile never needed speed. It had presence, and it became just as legendary as the cowl and cape themselves. And here's the part that makes it even better. The man who built it never actually sold the original car outright during his lifetime. Barris reportedly kept the very same vehicle in his personal collection for decades afterward, leasing near-identical replicas to the studio for stunt work and public appearances, while quietly holding on to the genuine article. By any reasonable measure, a $1 concept car that Ford had essentially thrown away became one of the single most valuable pieces of television memorabilia ever produced, eventually selling at auction decades later for a sum that would have made even the wealthiest Gotham City socialite blink twice. Of course, not everyone on set fully appreciated the vehicle's fragile, hand-built nature at the time. Crew members reportedly treated it with the kind of nervous caution usually reserved for a priceless museum piece, since a single dented fin could not simply be replaced with a trip to the local hardware store. Number 14. The pilot tested so badly that executives thought they had a disaster on their hands. Before Batman ever aired a single episode, ABC quietly panicked. Back then, test audiences were handed dials so they could rate what they were watching in real time, second by second. As a baseline, executives first showed the group a Mr. Magoo cartoon, and the dials climbed happily upward. Then the Batman pilot began, and the dials dropped like a stone. Confused test viewers simply did not understand the tone. They could not tell if the show wanted to be taken seriously or not, so they rated it somewhere in the miserable range, well below the scores that usually signaled a series worth saving. By any reasonable measure, this was one of the worst test results in the network's history, and executives reportedly believed they were sitting on an extremely expensive embarrassment. Normally, that is exactly where a show quietly disappears into a filing cabinet forever. But Batman had one saving grace. It was already too costly to kill. ABC had poured serious money into sets, costumes, and promotion, and canceling outright would mean eating the entire loss with nothing to show for it. So the network did the only thing left to do. They aired it anyway, and hoped for the best. Then a January evening in 1966 arrived, and everything flipped overnight. Once audiences saw the show in its proper broadcast context, with the winking self-awareness fully intact, Batman exploded into a genuine phenomenon, reportedly pulling in more than half of all American households watching television that night. Batman did not survive because executives believed in it. It survived because it was too weird, too expensive, and too far along to stop. And sometimes that is exactly how television history gets made. Number 13. Robin's boyish enthusiasm came with a genuine hospital bill. Burt Ward did not just play Robin, he practically doubled as his own stunt coordinator, and the results were rough. While Adam West had a seasoned professional stuntman handling his more dangerous falls, Ward reportedly got the honor of taking most of his own hits, over and over again. According to Ward's own later recollections, during his very first week filming the series, he spent 4 out of 5 days in the emergency room. In the earliest episodes, a Batmobile door reportedly flew open mid-turn and launched him straight onto the pavement like an unpaid volunteer for a car safety demonstration. Those flashy turbine exhaust sequences, sparks and all, were genuinely real, and they regularly singed his cape and skin in the process. During one particularly rough stunt, an explosion effect reportedly went wrong when the crew used real dynamite instead of a proper breakaway wall, and Ward ended up with a broken nose after being struck by flying debris, along with temporary hearing loss from the blast. And here's the part that makes it even better. Production simply kept rolling. Ward later joked, with the benefit of hindsight, that the studio's unofficial plans seemed to be seeing whether they could finish him off before the season wrapped, which makes every wide-eyed grin and every enthusiastic exclamation hit just a little bit differently once you know what it actually cost him. The Boy Wonder earned every one of those battle scars, one bruise at a time. Number 12. The Joker refused to shave, and Batman simply let it happen. When Cesar Romero signed on to play the Joker, he arrived with exactly one non-negotiable demand: the mustache stays. Romero was a classic Hollywood leading man, fiercely protective of the trademark look that had carried his career for decades, and shaving it off for a clown costume was simply not on the table. Not for a comic book villain, not for anyone. So, production did the only thing available to them. Makeup artists lathered thick white grease paint directly over the mustache, hair and all, hoping that studio lighting and the fuzzy picture quality of 1960s television sets would blur the evidence into invisibility. And for the most part, it worked. On old tube televisions, the mustache mostly melted into the glow of the screen. Fast forward to modern remastered releases though, and the illusion collapses completely. Every single hair is visible now, a ghostly mustache proudly haunting the Joker's grin in crisp high definition, stubbornly refusing to be erased. And here's the beautiful part. Nobody involved with the show actually seemed to care. There was no reshoot, no fix, no memo demanding a clean-shaven villain. The production simply leaned into it. A character defined by chaos and questionable taste could not even be bothered to shave properly, and somehow that fit the tone of the entire series perfectly. In any other production, this would have been treated as a costuming nightmare. On Batman, it became a feature. Number 11. One of the show's most beloved villains nearly vanished over a paycheck. Frank Gorshin's manic, cackling Riddler was an instant sensation, arguably one of the biggest reasons audiences kept tuning back in every week, and it reportedly earned him an Emmy nomination for his very first season on the show. So naturally, once negotiations opened for a second season, Gorshin's representatives asked for considerably more money than the show's original rate. The producers, working with a tight television budget, said no. And just like that, one of Batman's signature villains was suddenly unavailable. Rather than cave to the demand, the show tried something bold. A script written for the Riddler was hastily reworked into a brand new one-time villain called the Puzzler, played by the esteemed Maurice Evans, using nearly identical riddles and energy under a different name. Viewers were not fooled for a second. Meanwhile, actor John Astin, best known at the time for playing Gomez Addams, stepped into the green suit for a separate two-part story during Gorshin's absence. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed. Gorshin and the studio worked out a new arrangement, and he returned for a triumphant final season episode that served as both a victory lap and a quiet peace offering. Batman learned an important lesson here. You can rewrite a script, and you can hand a costume to someone new, but you cannot replace a very specific kind of manic genius with simple budget math. And then real life delivered its own plot twist. Reports suggest the network eventually raised its standard guest villain rate for the following season anyway. A quiet acknowledgement that the original Riddler dispute had been about more than one actor's ego. Of course, by then, the damage to that particular storyline had already been done, and the Puzzler experiment remains a strange little footnote that only the most dedicated fans tend to remember today. Number 10. The utility belt was one long-running practical joke. On this version of Batman, the utility belt had almost nothing to do with realism. It was about full, unwavering commitment to an idea. Specifically, the belt existed to sell the notion that Batman had already thought through every conceivable disaster, including several that the writers had clearly invented moments before filming. Yes, the belt famously contained shark-repellent bat spray, because naturally, Gotham's most pressing danger involved rogue great white sharks attacking a helicopter mid-flight. But that particular gadget was just the headline act. Buried alongside it were treasures such as bat tweezers, an all-purpose bat swatter, and memorably, a bat-branded soup thermos, because nothing strikes fear into the criminal underworld, quite like knowing Batman packed himself a hot lunch just in case. To keep the joke landing consistently, the writers slapped the word bat onto absolutely everything they could think of. A regular tool simply was not funny enough on its own. It needed to be aggressively rebranded first. To be fair, some of these ideas had genuine roots in the original comic books, including shark repellent, which had appeared in print years earlier. The show simply cranked the concept up as far as it would go. Preparedness stopped being a superpower somewhere along the way, and quietly became the punchline instead. Batman did not just fight crime here, he anticipated it aggressively, one absurdly labeled gadget at a time. Number 9, NBC nearly saved the show, until someone brought in a bulldozer. After ABC finally pulled the plug in 1968, the series was not immediately completely dead. Behind the scenes, there was reportedly genuine hope that a rival network might swoop in and rescue it for another season. And for a brief, hopeful moment, NBC looked ready to play hero. Then the Batcave disappeared. Following the cancellation, the studio did what productions often do once they assume a show is truly finished. They waited a little while, and when no immediate offer materialized, they made a costly and, in hindsight, premature call. The elaborate sets were demolished. The Batcave, Wayne Manor, all of it reduced to rubble and scrap lumber. Only about 2 weeks later, NBC officially expressed serious interest in bringing the show back for a 4th season. 2 weeks. When executives learned that the physical sets had already been bulldozed, they did the math, and rebuilding the Batcave alone would have cost a genuinely enormous sum, with recreating Wayne Manor pushing the total even higher. Suddenly, saving Batman was not a simple matter of quirky nostalgia. It was an expensive construction project nobody wanted to greenlight. NBC quietly passed. The rescue attempt died, not because audiences had vanished and not because the cast had walked away, but because someone moved a little too fast with a wrecking crew. Both Adam West and Burt Ward later said they could hardly believe how quickly the show's entire physical world had been erased, closing the door on any future season before anyone had truly decided against one. In the end, the Caped Crusader was not defeated by a supervillain. He was taken out by bad timing and an unusually motivated demolition team. Number 8. Batman almost had a completely different face. Before Adam West ever put on the cowl, producers were seriously considering another contender for the role, actor Lyle Waggoner. He was not merely in the running, he actually filmed a full screen test alongside another actor playing Robin, and reportedly came remarkably close to becoming the Caped Crusader himself. And honestly, it made complete sense on paper. Waggoner was tall, square-jawed, and looked like he had walked directly out of a comic book panel, and his version of Bruce Wayne played everything straight, heroic, and entirely sincere. The problem was, so did the script. And that sincerity was actually the joke the producers needed someone to understand, without ever winking at the camera. Eventually, the team realized the show did not need a traditional, straightforward superhero performance. It needed a straight man who understood exactly how absurd his surroundings were, and simply refused to acknowledge it out loud. That is where Adam West came in. West did not just play Batman seriously, he played him with a kind of mock seriousness, delivering the most ridiculous dialogue imaginable with the calm, steady authority of someone explaining tax law to a classroom, and suddenly the absurdity worked beautifully. The final push toward casting West reportedly came from an unlikely place, a Nestle Quik commercial in which producer William Dozier saw West playing a suave, James Bond-style spy, and immediately understood he had found someone who could parody serious genres without ever breaking character. As for Wagoner, losing the role of Batman did not slow him down for long. He went on to become a beloved fixture of a popular sketch comedy show for roughly 7 years, serving both as a cast member and as the program's announcer. And in a delightful twist of fate, he still ended up joining the wider DC universe anyway, playing Steve Trevor on the 1970s Wonder Woman television series, which honestly is a wonderfully tidy piece of comic book symmetry. The man who almost became Batman ended up fighting alongside an entirely different DC hero instead, wearing an entirely different kind of uniform. Decades later, Wagoner reportedly even returned to narrate a nostalgic retrospective documentary about the very show that once passed him over, footage that includes side-by-side comparisons of his own screen test against Adam West's. Watching the two performances together today, it becomes remarkably clear just how precisely West understood the assignment and just how differently the entire series might have turned out with a more traditionally heroic leading man standing in his place. Number 7. The villains were quite literally shot crooked. Good and evil on this show were not really defined through dialogue or costume choices. They were defined through pure camera geometry. Whenever the camera suddenly tilted, as if it had had one martini too many, that meant exactly one thing: a villain's hideout. These exaggerated tilted shots, known in filmmaking circles as Dutch angles, were not intended as subtle artistic flair. They were essentially a visual dad joke played completely straight. The villains were crooked, so the show simply shot them crooked, and the metaphor did absolutely zero heavy lifting to hide its own simplicity. The rule was practically ironclad, too. Wayne Manor stayed perfectly level in every scene. Gotham City Police Headquarters stood straight as an arrow, but the very moment the story cut to a lair filled with oversized props, color-coded henchmen, and a criminal mastermind in a themed costume, the camera leaned so hard it practically needed its own seatbelt. Even the angles themselves were not random. Certain recurring villains reportedly received their own signature tilt, subtly tweaking the frame to match their own particular flavor of lunacy, so the same city and the same show simply rotated through different degrees of crooked depending on who was scheming that week. It also doubled as a clever nod toward the source material, since those slanted, off-kilter frames mimicked the dynamic panel layouts of pop art comic books, turning every villain scene into something close to a living splash page. Stylish and thoroughly ridiculous, which was, of course, exactly the show's brand. Number 6. Those iconic holy exclamations were mostly made up on the spot. The format for Robin's now legendary outbursts started simply enough in the writer's room. Something bad happens. Batman stays perfectly calm, and Robin loses his composure with an exclamation built around the words holy, followed by whatever absurd noun fit the moment. But while the writers invented the basic gag, actor Burt Ward reportedly ran with it far beyond what was written on the page. He was encouraged to improvise his own variations right there on set, coming up with whatever sounded silly, clean, and memorable enough to fit a teenage crime fighter processing sheer panic at full volume. That is how the show ended up delivering gems built around ravioli, donuts, and an ever-growing parade of increasingly unhinged food references, oddball vocabulary, and the occasional bit of nonsense math. Some lines were carefully scripted in advance, but plenty were reportedly Ward freestyling in the moment, sometimes with no idea what word was about to come out of his own mouth until it actually did. The unpredictable mixture kept the running gag feeling genuinely fresh episode after episode. Batman stayed composed, the villains schemed away in the background, and Robin turned every single crisis into a small verbal fireworks display. Half scripted and half whatever popped into his head a second before the cameras rolled. Quick pause here, Bat fans. If you are enjoying this countdown so far, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. There is no shame in loving a show this delightfully ridiculous. And drop a comment letting us know who your favorite guest villain from this series is. Alright, let's get back to the madness with number 5. Number 5. Every single guest villain got paid the exact same rate, legend or not. On this production, fame simply did not translate into a bigger paycheck. If you were billed as a special guest villain, your rate was locked in before you ever put on a costume. According to reports, guest villains were paid roughly $1,250 per half-hour episode. And since the show almost always split its villains across a 2-part cliffhanger, that worked out to a tidy $2,500 total for a full story arc. Same contract, same terms, no exceptions. And here is the wild part. That flat rate reportedly applied whether you were a reliable working character actor or an absolute Hollywood legend. Oscar-nominated performers, celebrated concert hall entertainers, and prestige film stars all became financially equal the moment they stepped into Gotham City. The consistency was entirely intentional. Producers wanted a constantly rotating cast of villains, not a single star holding the entire show hostage over salary demands. If you wanted in, you accepted the standard rate, put on the costume, and fully committed to the bit. You could conquer all of Gotham City on screen, but you absolutely could not conquer the contract. Number 4. Batgirl was added specifically to save a fading show. By 1967, the initial wave of Batmania was starting to cool, and network executives were reportedly getting nervous. The show was still loud, colorful, and wonderfully ridiculous, but the cultural moment that had once stopped America in its tracks midweek was clearly fading. The network apparently made its position clear: change something meaningful or face cancellation. So, the producers reached for a classic television fix and introduced Batgirl. Enter actress Yvonne Craig, brought in for the 3rd season as Barbara Gordon's crime-fighting alter ego. The move was reportedly designed to attract younger female viewers and answer growing criticism that the show felt like an exclusive boys' club built entirely around gadgets. Batgirl was written as smart, capable, independent, and deliberately framed as a positive role model. To convince skeptical network executives the idea would actually work, producers reportedly filmed a special short presentation specifically for them, proving Batgirl could hold her own alongside Batman and Robin. The pitch worked, and the show earned one final season. But then television irony struck almost immediately. While the stated intent was bringing in young girls, Batgirl's sleek costume, motorcycle entrances, and Craig's genuinely athletic grace, drawn from her background as a trained dancer, apparently had a rather different effect on the overall audience. Male viewership reportedly climbed, and the network quietly stopped asking too many questions about exactly why the fix was working. Batgirl did not save the show forever, but she did prove one enduring lesson about television. Sometimes a fix works, just never quite for the reasons anyone originally planned. Number 3. Those colorful fight word graphics were carefully engineered chaos. Those bright comic book words splashing across the screen during every fist fight were not random flourishes tossed in for fun. They were carefully counted, curated, and rotated almost like a designer wardrobe built entirely for fists. Reportedly, the show used more than 80 unique onomatopoeia graphics across its run. Familiar words carried most of the workload, but the writers and editors regularly mixed in bizarre one-time inventions just to keep audiences guessing. These words existed for a genuinely practical reason too. Network executives worried the fight choreography looked too violent for younger viewers, so instead of trimming the action itself, the show simply covered it in comic book sound effect graphics. Suddenly, a punch was not just a punch anymore, it was a small burst of pop art. The color choices were not accidental either. Bright reds, yellows, and blues deliberately echoed the pop art movement sweeping through the culture at the time, channeling the same visual energy found in gallery paintings of the era. Every single fight scene effectively became a moving comic book panel, loud and colorful enough to distract from the fact that Batman and Robin were often clearly swinging at empty air. Those graphics were all added afterward in post-production, which meant Adam West and Burt Ward had to time their punches and reactions perfectly on set, trusting the editing team entirely to drop the right graphic in the right spot much later. Number 2. The show's most dramatic voice belonged to the man signing everyone's paychecks. That breathless narrator on Batman, the one who sounded like the entire world was ending roughly every 30 seconds, was not some overpaid professional announcer chewing the scenery for a paycheck. It was reportedly the show's own executive producer, William Dozier. According to accounts from the production, Dozier could not find a professional narrator who hit the exact tone he wanted. He auditioned a number of accomplished voice actors, all technically excellent, and all of them turned out to be the problem for one very specific reason. They were simply too good. Dozier reportedly explained that none of them could quite do it properly because they could not bring themselves to sound that deliberately, gloriously bad. So he stepped behind the microphone himself and delivered every line of narration in an overdramatic, breathless style that treated each ordinary plot twist like a genuine national emergency. He reportedly even worked under a playful pseudonym, Desmond Doomsday, which showed up on the show's official soundtrack album, while Dozier publicly pretended to have nothing to do with the performance. And he did not stop there. Dozier reportedly carried the exact same booming, over-the-top narration style over to a companion series, The Green Hornet, which famously helped introduce American audiences to a young martial artist named Bruce Lee. Same voice, same theatrical intensity, same breathless urgency. The man who could not find anyone else willing to sound quite that ridiculous on purpose ended up becoming the voice of Gotham City himself. Number 1. The most parodied dance move in television history was never written into the script. Okay, we saved this one for last, because it perfectly captures everything weird and wonderful about this entire show. The dance now widely known as the Batusi, the move that launched 1,000 parodies and pop culture references, was never actually in the script. No writer pitched it, and no choreographer blocked it out in advance. According to Adam West, he reportedly invented the entire routine himself, roughly 10 minutes before the cameras started rolling on the scene. West later explained that his inspiration reportedly came from magazine photographs and dance moves he had noticed people doing at nightclubs around that time. While rehearsing, he simply started experimenting with exaggerated off-balance movements, arms raised, fingers framing his face, looking every bit like a masked crime fighter who had wandered into the wrong party and simply refused to leave. The producers could easily have shut the whole idea down. Instead, they let him run with it. The name itself was a clever pun on the Watusi, an actual wildly popular dance craze of the era, which made the entire bit land even harder with audiences who caught the reference immediately. Here was the world's greatest detective, stone-faced and utterly serious, busting out moves like he genuinely believed he belonged on that dance floor. Decades later, the Batusi still refuses to die. It has been referenced in major films, parodied on beloved animated comedies, and become shorthand for a superhero doing something gloriously, unapologetically ridiculous. Adam West improvised one goofy dance on the spot, and somehow it became immortal. That, more than almost anything else on this list, is the real power of simply committing to the bit. Bonus fact, Gotham's rotating rogues gallery included an unusually legendary guest list. Beyond the regular cast, the show's special guest villain policy quietly attracted an extraordinary roster of Hollywood talent. Vincent Price appeared as the egg-obsessed criminal mastermind Egghead, bringing his signature theatrical menace to a character built almost entirely around egg-based puns. And, in a genuinely poignant footnote to Hollywood history, legendary stage and screen actress Tallulah Bankhead appeared across 2 episodes as the villainous Black Widow, a role that reportedly turned out to be her very last on-screen performance before her passing, roughly a couple of years later. Both appearances are a quiet reminder that this brightly colored, pun-filled show somehow managed to attract some of the most respected performers of an entire generation, all willing to don a themed costume and commit fully to the bit, right alongside everyone else in Gotham City. The guest list did not stop there either. Beloved comedian Milton Berle, celebrated pianist and showman Liberace, and acclaimed dramatic actor Eli Wallach all reportedly took turns menacing the dynamic duo at one point or another, each bringing an entirely different flavor of showmanship to Gotham City. 2 different actresses even shared the role of Catwoman across the show's run, each bringing her own distinct energy to the character, which meant audiences technically watched two entirely different feline villainesses square off against the same Batman without the show ever missing a beat. By any reasonable measure, it remains one of the strangest, most star-studded, rotating villain rosters in the entire history of American television. And it is a large part of why the show still gets discussed with genuine affection more than half a century later. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird and wonderful facts about Batman, 1966, that most fans never knew. Drop a comment below with the fact that surprised you the most. And if you enjoyed this trip back to Gotham, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who still loves the Caped Crusader. Until next time, this is your host, signing off.